Hi everyone, welcome to a new video. Thanks for joining me today. So today I have another time-lapse project for you. So this is a drawing that I finished in May for the Patreon students. So you can find the real-time projects on Patreon for the $4 membership. So if you're interested in following along from start to finish, have a look on there. There's a link in the description. So I drew a monarch butterfly on a flower. I still have no idea what kind of flower this is, but it was a really fun small project that didn't take too long to complete. I worked with Faber Castell polychromos colored pencils and a white Caran d'Ache luminance on Canson 1557 180 grams paper, and the size is about 8 by 10, but the drawing didn't fill up all of the paper. So in total it took about 3.5 hours to finish. So let's get started. I have the line drawing already down, and the first thing I like to do is just lighten up the sketch a little bit with a kneaded eraser, just to make sure that you won't see any of the graphite lines showing through the color pencil anymore. And then I started off with the butterfly. So I started off with mapping out all the dark lines and shapes on the wing and the body. And I did that with Payne's gray. So I decided to not start out with black right away, but start out with the gray first, because I always like to put some other colors underneath my black to put a little bit more depth in it. If you just start out with black right away, it might just look a little bit flat. So I mapped out all the dark shapes lightly, so with light pressure. And this way you still have enough texture left on the paper to put other colors on top. And at this step it took quite a while because there's a lot of little patterns in the wing, and I had to draw around all these white dots that were on the end of the wings. So it took quite some time for this first step. And then I also did the same for the body. So I filled in the body with this Payne's gray color and I drew around all the white dots. So after this first step, I went over with Caput Mortem Violet, which I really like for black fur or black things. It's just a really nice color to put underneath there to give some extra depth to the color. And then I also put a little bit of sky blue on top as well. And then when I had everything mapped out, I went over with black. So now I really darkened up the wings. This creates a nice contrast in the drawing right away. And then it becomes a little easier to judge how dark you can go with the rest of the colors. So that's why I started out with the darkest areas. That's what I always do with colored pencil, basically. So I start with all the very dark areas, and then it gives me a lot more direction of how dark I need to go with the rest of my colors in there. So this is quite a small drawing, so I had to sharpen my pencils quite often. You have to make sure that your pencils stay very sharp. My sharpener is the Faber Castell Color Grip, which I really like. So I just carefully mapped out everything. And if you want to follow along with the real-time projects here on YouTube, I have started live streaming again. So be prepared for the live stream next Tuesday, because that will be a colored pencil stream. So that will be a draw along project if you're interested in following along with some real-time projects here on YouTube. Okay, so then it was time to move on with all the red and orange areas on the wing. So I work from light to dark, so I start off with a very light neutral base layer, and then I start adding all my brighter colors on top of that, and each time I add a little bit more pressure on the pencil until the paper texture is gone. So I just started off with a very neutral terracotta color, and then I added some reds and some yellows, you can see that the back wing, or the wing that is the furthest away, it's a little darker than the front one. And I also made sure to blur out the edge between these red areas and then the black, because I didn't want very harsh lines in there. So I made sure to add a bit of Captain Morton violet on the transition from the red into the black to create a very smooth surface. And after that, I did add a little bit of extra white dots with the Sakura Jelly Roll pen. So with that, I added the little tiniest dots on the wing as well. And then I moved along the same way for the wing that is the closest to us. Started off with the top half. With the same terracotta colors and brighter oranges. I'm not exactly sure which colors there are anymore, but the full color list is on Patreon, so if you want to follow along, you will download, you can download the color list and then you see exactly what I used. And again, adding some tiny dots on the edge of the wing with the Sakura white Jelly Roll pen. That's just a little easier than if you have to draw around all these tiny little dots. So I drew around all the larger ones, but the tiny ones I put in with the pen. And then the bottom half of the wing was a little bit more yellowish looking. Also, you could see a little bit of the shadow of the top half showing through the bottom half. So I also made sure to put that in. And then I just kept building up my layers, adding more yellow and more orange each time, just adding a light pressure, and then when I'm happy with what it looks like, I add a little bit more color with a little bit more pressure to smooth out the texture of the paper. And I also use the white Camouflage Luminant for that, so I also use that as a burnishing tool basically. And then the wings were finished. So these wings definitely took the most time of this drawing. Then I could continue with the body. So I also made the body nice and black. Made sure to look really closely at the shape of the body. And also the shape of the head. I didn't draw in the paws yet. I saved the paws for the very last, so I wanted to do the flower first and then do the paws. Oh, actually, I also picked a black pen because I felt like some parts of the wings weren't dark enough, so I picked a Stabilo ink pen and I just darkened up the wings and the body here and there, and I felt like that gave a lot of extra contrast to the drawing, but that's optional. Alright, so moving on to the flower. The flower had some really nice bright orange and red tones in it, so I wanted to recreate that. So first I picked an orange and I drew the outlines again to make sure that I didn't lose the shape of the flower. And then I started with adding in all the shadows. So I mapped out all the dark parts in between the leaves. Again, starting off with the darkest areas makes it a little bit easier for me to judge than the next step. So the center of the flower, you can see all those little thingies coming out of the center. I'm not sure what you call those. I had to draw around those for the back leaves. And then I filled in the leaves with a base tone of an orange, more neutral medium orange. Just a light layer of that, so I made sure that there was still a lot of paper texture visible. And the slightly darker leaves I made slightly darker, so I went over a couple of times with light pressure. And the very light areas I kept very light. So then it was just a matter of keeping adding colors, the colors that I saw in the leaves, made sure to get a lot of different colors in there. So I also put in some yellow, and then for the darker shadows I put in some brighter red. And patience is the key with colored pencils, so it will take many layers before the paper is finally filled up, especially for the larger areas. So I had to keep going and keep adding my oranges and yellows, looking at the reference photo all the time. Oh, the reference photo is from Pixabay, by the way. And then when I felt like there was a nice variety of colors in the leaves, I started adding a bit more pressure on my colors. So before I burnish with the white Caran d'Ache luminance, I like to make sure that there are enough layers on the paper. Otherwise, the luminance it lightens up the colors too much. It does lighten up the colors anyway, but when I make sure that I have enough of the burnishing done already with just the colors, I can only use the white Caran d'Ache luminance to smooth out everything an extra time, instead of really using the white Caran d'Ache luminance to push all the colors into the paper. I don't like to do that anymore. So adding more red, and now the leaves are starting to get a nice thick color. And then I picked up the luminance to just smooth out everything without lightening up the colors too much. And then after that I could go back in and just add a little bit more shadow here and there. So switching between orange and red all the time to make sure to get a nice variety. I didn't want the flower to be too orange or too red because it's a mix of both on the reference photo as well. Okay, so when I was happy with the leaves, I moved on to the center of the flower. So first I mapped out all these little thingies coming out, all these little shapes with a darker color. And I didn't spend too much time on this area, to be honest, but I went over it quickly. When mapping out all the dark shapes with Caput Mortem Violet, I went over with yellows and put down a base layer on everything. I just wanted it to fit with the rest of the drawing nicely, but it was not the most important part of the drawing, so that's why I didn't spend too much time on it. And the paws would overlap most of this anyway. So then I did put in the paws and look real closely at the shape of these paws, because they do have joints and it's very important that they have the right shapes to it. So I filled in the paws with some very bright, I'm not sure which color it was Delft blue, I think, or blue violet. So I mapped out the paws with that, and then I put black on top of it and a little bit of that pen as well. And then it was time for the very last area of the drawing, which was the stem. So also didn't spend too much time on this because it was not the most important area of the drawing. I wanted the attention to be mainly on the wings and the leaves, but I didn't want to make sure that there was a nice contrast in the stem. So I put in the basic shadows and shapes with Payne's Gray, and then I added some greens on top. So I wanted to make sure that this stem was not too bright green, so that's why I mixed in some gray with it, some Payne's Gray. And then I used a combination of some warm greens and also some cooler greens. And a little bit of texture, some fuzzy texture with the white Sakura Jelly Roll pen. And then after 3.5 hours, this drawing was finished. It was a really fun one to draw, a little bit easier and quicker than my usual colored pencil drawings, but that's why it also really was a good project for beginners to follow. And the results were very nice to see. So I hope you enjoyed it. Let me know what you think of it in the comments. If you would like to see more smaller projects like this, make sure to join the live stream on Tuesday. I'll be drawing a cat eye, and you'll also be able to follow along. It will be an easier project to do as well. So yeah, I hope you liked it. Join my Patreon if you want to join the club and support my work and follow along with all the tutorials. And then I'll see you in the live stream or in the next video. Thanks for watching.